We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about building and leading data teams in the age of AI. We've got a fantastic guest here. Before I introduce him, I would love to hear from everybody in the audience. Tell us where you are dialed in from. Always fun to see that. Let me kick it over to Joe Squire. Joe is the Director of Analytics and Data Science with Heart and Vascular Institute at UPMC, and super happy to have you here, Joe. Audience is in for a real treat. Could you say hi and tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks, John. So my background actually is originally I was a clinical nurse. So started out as a nurse, did that for about 7 years, and transitioned into data, and kind of snowballed from there, and was fortunate enough to have a career where I was able to work my way up and be able to take on some team leadership. And now I sit as a director overseeing a couple of our teams here with the Heart and Vascular Institute at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So we're out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is our headquarters, but we span like 3 states, a couple continents. So a large organization. So it's been an interesting ride for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and in a space where you're doing good things, helping people. The heart is pretty important, so pretty important outcomes here. So it seems like a noble cause. Yeah, exactly. It's a minor detail. Let's get into the core of the show. We're going to talk about some best practices for building and leading analytics teams, which Joe's got a lot of experience with. That's going to be fantastic. And then we're going to get into how AI is changing the future for us data folks. Love hearing Joe's thoughts on that. So, Joe, first, maybe let's jump right into what kind of your team's scope looks like and who's on the team. I think it's good to understand sort of like what your purview is to ground the conversation.
Yeah. So my team, since it's a big organization, we sit in a specific service line, so a department, if you will, within the hospital system. And so we oversee a lot of the data that runs through the Heart and Vascular Institute. There's other data teams within UPMC, and there's an enterprise team that basically deals with enterprise infrastructure and warehousing and everything. And then we have our team that partners with that team to support our specific service line. And so what my team does is a lot of it is centered around outcomes analytics, operations analytics, or research analytics. And so I have 3 teams underneath me. I have 2 teams that are basically subject matter experts in different data areas. So what they do is they deal a lot with data quality assurance. And they also partner with the end users to help them understand the data, basically a data literacy effort. So understand the data, understand the metrics, understand what levers we can pull to change those metrics, improve an outcome that we're seeing. And then the other team is our basically our analytics and data science team. So a lot of what we deal with is research in that area. And so what we do is we partner with a lot of principal investigators, so they'll usually physicians of some sort that will come to us with questions, and we'll use various data sources, whether it's EHR data, clinical registry data, claims data, and we'll work with those principal investigators to answer the questions that they're asking and publish. So we're a pretty active group. We put out 50 plus peer-reviewed articles or journal articles per year, and we're seeing a lot of growth in that area. So it's been encouraging. It's been for sure, like I said, a wild ride with learning and developing all these different skills over the last couple of years. And I'll be upfront with everybody. I don't pretend to be an expert in anything. I don't pretend to be a leadership expert. I don't pretend to be an expert in AI. They're just things that I'm interested in, things that I have just developed that passion for, and really want to bring that and let people understand where I'm coming from as somebody that am on that learning path and can stand on the shoulders of giants before me, and help people understand it and do the same.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's why we love you, Joe. That humility and that real perspective that you bring there. How much do you still get to be hands-on versus kind of like mostly delivering through others? Because your team's fairly large. Sometimes that can be a little straining. Like what's that like for you?
Yeah, it all depends on the day. And, that's a big, if we're going to, when we start getting into like leadership and all that kind of stuff, there is a real technical decay that occurs when you move into leadership. And that's not a bad thing. It's a necessary thing, just because you can't be head down on the keyboard all the time if you're leading teams, because if you're doing that, you're not looking up and out. You're not seeing, is Bill from IT over here going to backstab me and take my team down, and now we're going to get a 30% reduction kind of thing. So being able to look up and out and being able to see what the landscape looks like, both, internal to the company, as well as what the external forces are that are out there that might be shaping how you should perform. AI is one of those. And, that's where the technical decay occurs. But just because you're not really, head down on the keyboard anymore, and you might lose some of those technical skills, you're developing skills elsewhere. You're developing strategy skills. You're developing communication skills. You're developing relationship building skills. I went through the same thing, moving from being a nurse, a clinical bedside nurse, to data. I mean, it was a hard transition for me. A lot of and the same thing with data people, is a lot of your, what should I say? A lot of your, who you feel you are and what you do is tied to those actions, the technical skills that you have. And it's hard to really, in your mind, give up and move away from being willing to move away from those. As a nurse, me providing assistance to a patient, a big thing with nurses is IV skills, being able to put an IV in. If you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing. So, moving away from the bedside, that was always kind of one of those benchmark standards that I would just, I knew as the longer I was away, the less I would be good at it. And so the same thing with data, like whenever you move away from that very in-depth individual contributor roles to a leadership role, you're going to lose those skills. You might not remember a certain syntax for your Python script that you're writing. You might not remember exactly how to do the manipulation in SQL that you need to do. And so those things, it will happen, and people need to understand that and accept that if they're looking to move from an IC role to a leadership role. But yeah, that's the very long answer to that question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good perspective, and I think especially for folks who haven't made that jump yet, and are still in an IC role, so much of like how you view yourself as an employee and a team member is that technical skill. Like, oh, I'm so good at Python. I'm the expert of this relational database. Whatever you think it is, I can create dashboards better than anybody. And the idea of those skills kind of getting a little more dull over time as you focus on other stuff is like maybe counterintuitive or a little scary, but it's, you got to think like, it's not just about you once you're the leader, it's about the effectiveness of this whole group that's around you. So yeah, it's same page. It gets hard, but it's part of the journey,
Right.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit, like, how do you view, like, what are some of the most important things for a manager, for a leader to do for their data team? Like if somebody's thinking about being a manager for the first time, they've never had experience with it, like where would you kind of point them? Hey, these are the things you really got to nail to do a good job at it.
Yeah. And I think you have to get clear on why you want to move into a management, move into a leadership role. A lot, I mean, and granted, people work to have money. So usually that management, that leadership role comes with additional pay that you may not see at the IC level. So, and that's not saying like, oh, you can't move into a leadership role because you want money, but at the same time, you're taking on those responsibilities. So you need to understand, okay, why do I really want to lead? Is this something that I'm going to be good at? Is it something that I'm going to, want to do long term? And and you don't really know till you get into it, right? So if you move into that role and you don't feel it's a fit, there's no harm in going backwards. But I would say getting clear on your why and why you want to move into leadership is going to be crucial. And and that why for me, and I think, and I'll my big influence with leadership is a guy called Jocko Willink. And so if anybody if anybody wants some really solid leadership books, podcast, Jocko has a bunch of that stuff out there. I actually have a book right in front of me right here. It's Leadership Strategy and Tactics is one of his books. And I would recommend any of his books to anybody. His first one's Extreme Ownership. Second one's Dichotomy of Leadership. The one I just showed you is his third book, I believe. It might be his fourth. But he also has a really good podcast that's out there. But that being said, whenever you move into a leadership position, that why needs to be established. And I would say that a lot of people should use the why of it's to help my team win. So everything that you do should be geared toward helping your team win. Now, having said that, you also have to be balanced. So your team is not the only thing in an organization that you have to operate within your organization as well. So your team is an extension of the organization. So you can't do things that are going to make your team win, but put somebody else down in the organization. So it has to be a holistic view as well. And so I think getting clear on that why, and then moving into what specifically you really should understand and get better at as a leader is being able to listen. So it sounds easy, and it is easy, but just simple things like putting your phone away and actually paying attention to the person that's on the screen or in front of you.
Yep.
Or just being willing to stop everything when somebody walks into your office or calls you on Teams or whatever it is, and being able to just sit there and listen to what they have to say. The other big thing is build relationships. So whether it's within your team or whether it's with stakeholders, building those relationships builds trust. And that trust gets you a really far way down the road with different initiatives, different things that may come up. And so, that trust is then an extension of your team. So people will see you, and they'll see a team that they can rely on and that they can ask of. And then, that builds your leadership capital. So if you need to pull some strings later on for a certain thing, you can also pull those strings. The other aspect is you really need to be disciplined. So if you're going to go into a leadership role, you have to be disciplined to take the time and invest it into your team. So it's establishing regular one-on-ones. It's checking in whenever you feel that there may be something that's out of whack, something doesn't feel right. And, you need to be disciplined and do that for your team. You also need to be disciplined in the work that you do as an individual, because if you're not disciplined in that, you're not going to be able to put the time towards your team. And then the other big thing, like I mentioned, is you got to be balanced. So you can go really hard on, building relationships, but if you're going to go and, build relationships with your stakeholders, and that's, you're going all in on that, and you neglect the relationship of your team, then, you're going to lose out. So being able to say, hey, when I approach something, I understand there's a spectrum and I need to stay in the middle of that spectrum, and just kind of checking yourself continuously on where you should be and whether you're too far one way or the other way. So getting that balance is really key as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. A lot of stuff to kind of juggle and get your head around. There's a bunch of things I want to dive further into. First, I want to put this quick poll up to the audience, just to understand who's in the room. So if you guys could tell us where you're at, what stage of career, that'll help Joe and I understand kind of, are you guys looking for the job? Are you, senior analyst, moving up to a manager level, senior data scientist? Yeah. So we've got a lot of folks at that aspiring analyst, senior analyst level. So I think folks that are, leadership is on the horizon, not necessarily here yet, which makes a lot of sense. So looking for some good advice on that. How do you think about that? You mentioned like one-on-ones with your team, broader team meetings. Like, how do you balance that? Like, do you do one-on-ones with everybody like every week, every other week, every month? And then how often do you do like the full data team, or is it into like individual pods? Because you said you guys have sort of 3 lanes on the team. Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so my one-on-ones I do monthly. I know there's a lot of people that say you should do them like weekly or bi-weekly, but it's not. I don't see the need for that with my teams in particular. Again, like that can be adjusted. That's something that you should feel out as basically a partnership between the individual. So your whole team doesn't need to have a monthly one-on-one. Like you could increase the frequency with others or decrease the frequency depending on the needs of that individual. In terms of, meeting with the team, and this is actually where I practice that individualized meeting structure. So one of my teams, two of my teams I'll meet with weekly for different reasons. One's more of a stand-up where I kind of act as a project manager, and that's with our analytics group where we're running through our projects, if there's any issues, if we need to, move something onto someone else's plate. So those kinds of things. The other one is more of a, I kind of serve as the technical end on that side. So it's if there's any issues that come up that are technically related, I can be there to answer that. And then my third team, I generally try to meet with them once a month or once a quarter. They're extremely independent. They have technical support from someone on that team, so they don't need me as much. So it's like, and then, the groups are independent enough that we don't really have to put them all together. But so we don't really do like a larger group meeting. And I think the key there to answer your question is really individualize it, make sure it works for the team. You adjust yourself. You don't, again, it comes down to that balance. Like, don't be so rigid that you can't think critically about how you're approaching something. Like just because you meet one-on-one with everybody once a month doesn't mean you can't adjust that. So I think it comes down to being balanced and being critical about what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And before, you mentioned that you sort of have an open door where, if somebody comes to you, whether that's like on Slack or Teams or actually in person when you're in the office, like you're willing to drop everything. And I think just that, giving them that feeling is really, really important, that, you're always going to be there, even if you don't have to have like just at the set times to talk. I think super, super important. Yeah. I'm curious.
I think
go ahead.
Just to piggyback off that is saying to somebody, hey, my door's always open, is different than approaching them and saying, hey, something seems off. Let's chat, or do you want to chat? And I think there's a big difference there in terms of how you approach it. So, in my view, the way to approach it is you should be the one that approaches them and asks, hey, is everything all right? Do you want to talk? Because it's a lot. So my wife and I are going through this right now where it's like the grandparents say, hey, anytime you want to go out, just let us know and we'll take the kids. And, that's
Feels
different.
Guilty, though. Yeah.
Yeah. It's different than saying, hey, next Friday, we're going to take the kids and you guys go out.
Yeah.
And that's just, it makes a big difference whenever the person who's offering the assistance, who has basically the power dynamic there, can like actually comes and says, we're going to do this, or do you need help? And they actually define, okay, now's the time, or let's do it in 2 hours, versus saying, hey, my door's always open. Come ask me any questions when you need it. So I would say that definitely be proactive in having those conversations rather than, just extending an open invitation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I think it's, the kids and grandparent watching them analogy resonates with me, because in the same boat right now. It feels like a big ask. Yeah. Awesome. How about when you think about like some of the best leaders that you've had, Joe, how would you describe them? Like, what were some of the characteristics that you think made them so awesome for you?
Yeah, it was the listening. They, and I feel like I abused this person in particular just because I would just, I didn't want answers really. I just wanted to talk to them and tell them my frustrations and they were willing to sit there and listen to me about it and actually engage in dialogue about it. And, not always try to offer a solution because not everybody wants a solution. Not every situation demands a solution. Sometimes it's just, you need to vent. And so that's that was one of the biggest things, is just being able to, easily get a hold of them and being able to just sit there and talk to them and have them listen to you and listen to your hopes, fears, dreams, and anything in between. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that really resonated with me. I think the other end of that is that leader being willing to get you involved and get you into projects that you may not necessarily, have ever been involved with, but you might find interesting, and it gets you exposure to, different areas of the organization or different leaders that could open other opportunities. And I think that's another key area that leaders that have really resonated with me have excelled. So that listening and being actively involved in your career development.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for, a lot of times people will talk about like leader versus manager. And one of the things I think that the great leaders who are actually building people up do is exactly that. Like they're not just getting work done for the team, which that's kind of how a manager thinks, but they're thinking like, okay, I've got this person on my team and she's here and I want to get her here, and looking for those opportunities proactively that she might not see. And yeah, I'd love, same thing. And another way kind of to just sort of bucket those things is just, sounds like somebody who cares a lot about you, like they're willing to listen, they're invested in your development, which, yeah, I think getting that feeling is really important. Think about the opposite would be pretty defeating as a team member, to feel like somebody doesn't care. That's when you leave, so, awesome. Yeah. So I want to throw up one more quick poll, and thanks to everybody in the audience. The questions are coming in on the questions tab. Appreciate that. I want to hear a little bit about what folks think is going on with AI right now, as we're going to shift into this, and then we'll ask Joe some questions about AI. So see what folks think. If this is going to take all our jobs, not sure what to think. Increases productivity, but we still need analysts, data scientists. I love that. Yeah. Wow. Overwhelming. That's basically what everybody says. Productivity increase, but still needs data scientists and data analysts. What do you think, Joe? Where do you think, like, big picture, like what do you think's going on with AI and where we're headed?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would agree with the majority of the poll in terms of, in the near term, where we're going to expect to see the changes are in task related issues, not jobs. So when I say that, I mean, with jobs, with individuals that sit in job functions, we operate in a system, right? And that system is very complex. It's like working in a large organization where you have a highly matrixed environment, where you have multiple communication channels, various random things that need to be done here and there. And AI is not good at that, at least not right now. And so what AI is good at is very task related problems. So whether it's, fixing syntax in a code that's throwing an error, or it's, producing a chart based on some data that you feed it. And it's really good at that. It's really efficient at that, and it does it quickly, within reason. And so I think in the near term, like I said, you're going to see a lot of tasks within analytics professionals' roles changing because of the introduction to AI, because of the introduction of AI into various systems that they work with. But all that's going to do is cause the role to evolve over time. And so I think that's really where we're going to see like the near term impact. Now, long term, obviously really fuzzy. There's a great book out there by Ethan Mollick called Co-Intelligence that basically discusses how AI can work with humans and what it looks like currently and what the future directions are. And I'm probably going to butcher this, but he lays out basically 3 future directions that could occur. One being that AI doesn't get any better, and this is where we're at, is where it's going to stay. 2, AI gets exponentially better, and humans learn to work with it, and it may cause some job loss in certain areas, but it'll create more jobs in others. And then 3, AI takes over the world and destroys humanity. And so, I mean, it gets a bit extreme, but it's not unreasonable. So I think, having said that, like, the future of what analytics professionals and their roles look like with AI, I can only speculate, but I suspect what's going to happen is you're going to have a very small subgroup of people that are still very code savvy. They're still the ones like on the edge, like developing new libraries, new ways of using the code, new things like that. And I think a majority of like the other analytics professionals, they're going to shift from being syntax oriented. So you don't need to necessarily understand like exactly how to do a for loop in Python, or how to do a pivot in SQL. It's going to be more business oriented. So and this is what we always tell people, is like, you have to understand what business problem you're solving. So approaching problems more at a higher level versus, oh, I need to think about the code. You're thinking, okay, I'm solving this problem, and I can use this tool and that tool and put it all together. And you're alleviated from having to do lower order tasks, like figuring out syntax for how you're going to execute the code. And I think, from my perspective, that's where you're going to see a big shift down the road. But again, we tend to, underestimate the long-term impacts or overestimate them. So it'll probably be somewhere along that spectrum, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think you said it well. How about today on your team? Like, are folks adopting AI? Is it some people are, some aren't? Is it everybody?
Yeah. So I think in today's, like, where we're at today with AI, like I'll use my one team member who's our lead, and he's a hardcore SQL developer. He's been doing it for years and years and years. And so, it's not uncommon for him to write a SQL script that's 1,000, 2,000 lines plus long to build out these cohort scripts that we can do research with. And AI does not do well with that length of code. Mm-hmm. Like, it's terrible. And so I think right now where we're at is you see a lot of either younger analysts adopting it because they're not working on as complex of code, or it's just native to them to start coming up with that technology. And I think you also see like people like me who are, in a leadership position where I'm using it for efficiency gains, where, if I just need to write a simple, SQL statement, I can easily do that, like get the shell adjust for what I need to do, and it increases my efficiency a ton. But I think you also have the other end where you have these individuals that are experts in what they do, and they're writing such complex code, and they're doing such complex things that they cannot, AI just isn't at that level. And, there's good and bad about that. I think the bad part is that a lot of them tend to dismiss AI, and they say it's not worth it. It doesn't do what it needs to do. And that's true for them. But at the same time, what they're doing is they're shooting themselves in the foot. And so Ethan Mollick makes a really good statement saying that we should treat AI right now as this is the dumbest AI we will ever work with. And saying that puts it in perspective, right? Because it's pretty impressive right now what we can do. Like, just if you think back, July of 2022, we didn't have ChatGPT. Like, it didn't exist. And now we have these amazing capabilities of, I could go in and, put together a whole workout regimen and plan a vacation, and, all in a matter of a few prompts. And And I think like these people that are dismissing AI right now and saying it can't do what they do or it will never be able to do what they do are, are being short-sighted. I'm not saying AI will ever be able to do certain things or will ever be able to replace certain things that people do, but if we look at it from the viewpoint of this is the dumbest AI we'll ever work with, then you have to be willing to learn it and understand, okay, how is it evolving? How can it meet needs? How can I use the strengths of AI to offset my weaknesses? And that requires you basically trying to learn and work with it in different capacities. You may not be able to do it with your regular day job. Like for instance, nursing, I'm going to go back to nursing. There's not, like on a day-to-day basis on a nursing floor, nobody's pulling out AI and working with AI. But, there are other side pieces that nurses could use AI. So a lot of them require projects to advance their careers. And so using AI to come up with different ideas for projects or how you would approach that project, like things like that would be how somebody who in their day-to-day job sees they can't use AI. But, thinking of outside of that, whether it's in your personal life or some area around your immediate day-to-day tasks that you can start working with AI, using it, experimenting with it, understanding what it can and cannot do right now, and, continuing to do that because it's only going to get better. And, what's a weakness now may be a strength later. And so you need to keep up with that and keep trying to understand how it fits in with what you do and whether you can, use it for more later on.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Fantastic summary. I found it to be pretty hit or miss. Like some things it's great for, sometimes it's not. But I think that the key nugget there is like, assume this is the dumbest one you're ever going to work with. And like 3 years from now, it's probably unrecognizable. And if you haven't learned, how to get your bearings with it, like you're probably going to be pretty far behind. So that's how I'm thinking about it. Very, very similar way. Do you talk with your team about this? Like any expectations, like how much they should be using this, or do you kind of let them figure it out on their own?
Yeah, like I guess I didn't get to that part of your original question. I forgot about it when going down that rabbit hole. But yeah, in terms of my team, like I don't force them to use AI. I talk with them about AI. It's always funny because usually you see eye rolls, and it's probably the same in the audience right now, like eye rolls. They're like, okay, whatever. But yeah, I just like to talk about it and discuss it, and I'm not going to force it on any of them. Two reasons. Like one, AI just isn't where they need it to be to do what they do, a lot of them. And two, everybody deals with sensitive data, but with us, we're a highly regulated environment being in healthcare. So we're not going to just, fire up GitHub Copilot and just go to town, like asking it a bunch of questions and, all that kind of stuff. There's the autocomplete stuff with GitHub Copilot is fantastic. I've really enjoyed like it saves you a lot of time from typing out a ton of variables in certain situations, but using the actual generative AI chat piece, like I haven't really looked into it, but I would assume that there's not like any type of high security around that. So yeah, I'd say it's more of a conversation right now with my teams. And, as if we were to get tools in that have slowly put in AI into them, it would be more like from there, that's an introduction that we can really sink our teeth into. But just discussing how I use it and what I've been able to use it for and what I've been able to do with it, those are the conversations that are occurring. And a lot of that centers around, presenting the data. So whenever we get to that point where we're talking about, okay, now we have to put it together, we have to figure out what's the story and how do we do that? Generative AI is fantastic at stories. So prompting it to come up with being like, hey, you're an expert storyteller. I did XYZ over the last 5 years, and I need you to put this into an engaging story and make it into something that I can then, present to somebody. and it'll come up with the story. It'll give you the whole line. It'll give you, and it's really good because I'm not a great storyteller. And so being able to take that and then, apply it to your slides, like you can make a whole presentation from the story that it's created for you.
Yeah.
And it really does get you off the starting blocks a lot faster. It gets you out of that ideation, like, just stuck in your thoughts and trying to figure out where you're going to take this and what you want the end product to be, to, oh, we're already halfway there. We're living on a prayer kind of thing. So so I think that's kind of where a lot of my use cases have come from in terms of like the bit larger discussions with my groups, my teams, in terms of how AI can be used and how we can apply it to what we do.
I love that. Might be my favorite nugget from this whole talk, because I think when a lot of us in data, when we think about AI, we're thinking like generate the SQL script, play with the spreadsheet for us, but we're not thinking about that. Okay, we've got the insights on our own. We did that technical piece, bake that into a story, give us a framework, which it is great. It's like such a good brainstorming partner, and like you get results from it.
Mm-hmm.
Fast too, which is just really, I love having it as a brainstorming for other kind of related tasks. And that's a really good one. Like, just how do I communicate this? Fantastic insight. I hope folks in the audience are taking notes on that one. With that, we'll move into the live Q&A piece. We'll start with a very easy one for you, Joe. Adolfo asks, what was the name of that author you mentioned? This should be an easy one for you.
Yeah, so I'll put it in the where's the chat? Yeah, so the chat. So for leadership, it's Jocko Willink, and then the for the AI one, it's Ethan Molik. I think that's it. I think that's how you spell Molik. He's a Wharton professor. Great follow on LinkedIn, by the way. Some really interesting stuff that comes out of his account.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't speak to Ethan, but Jocko, I mean, if you want to get fired up, like listen to a YouTube video of him. if you want he's so good at motivating people, Yeah.
The classic one's the good video by Jocko. Just
yep.
Actually, I have a poster at work just as good on it.
Awesome. Yeah, he's great. Let's see what else we have here. We've got one with a bunch of upvotes here. So this is for Catherine, who's asking potential risks and privacy concerns. Integration of AI into personal data processing poses potential risks to privacy. There's a lot of trust. Like, how do you see that involving? And you're like in a spot where this matters more than almost any other spot. So
yeah, it's tough because there's, like, for instance, I'm working on an initiative right now where we're wanting to bring in an AI solution. So let me back up. One of my teams, what they actually still do data entry, like manual data entry. So they're going into patient charts and they're looking through the clinical notes and they're pulling out certain information to put in. And so we want to bring in an AI solution that'll make that more efficient and, hopefully eventually lead to some automation. But the process of getting that vetted right now with our organization is full of red tape. And there's good reasons for that, right? There's that concern over the privacy. There's that concern over the security of the technology. And so you're right. How I see it evolving is I think as these companies become, more established, there are certain security protocols that or security certifications that you can obtain that make you more trustworthy, that you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to basically show that you can handle certain attacks or you're being vigilant. And so I think as these companies become more evolved, those certifications will come in. That'll make them more trustworthy. In terms of the AI, that's still that's one of those big question marks still, is where is the data actually going? And I think a lot of companies are gonna have to stand up processes, and that's part of what UPMC has done, is stand up these different groups that will evaluate this and try to understand, okay, are we sending this data somewhere? Is it staying there, or are they getting rid of it? Can we not send it there? So yeah, I don't really have a great answer for the whole the privacy issue of it, but it's certainly a concern. Me as an individual, maybe I played a little loose, but I'm not a huge like data privacy person. I kind of set up like whenever an app asks me, do you want to like send personal feedback and individualized feedback? I'll say sure. So for me, it's not so much of a concern, but you're right. As industries and as data teams, we have to think about that, and we have to be cognizant of that. And it's definitely an evolving area right now.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, it depends on the level of data, right? Like, how am I using this app? They want to see that. Yeah, sure. But like medical records, big major different story. So yeah, well said, Joe. So another one here, this one's from Ramesh. So he says, will AI take over the data architecture stream of work? So architecting your database, maybe getting into data engineering a little bit. What do you think about that? Is that something we should be thinking is going to go away for us data people?
Yeah, I'll be honest, that isn't really like our enterprise group does a lot of the architecture part of it. But I mean, I could see it definitely going that direction at some point. Again, if you think of it from the standpoint of this is the dumbest AI we'll ever work with, I could see there being a lot of application in that area in terms of just getting the initial structure out there. And you could even do this now. Like you could probably go in and just prompt it to say, hey, I want to set up, this warehouse for this company in this industry. Give me some standard processes, some standard setups that you would recommend for that. And they could they definitely generate ideas to get you started. In terms of, like some of the engineering processes in there, I don't think it could handle that right now, obviously, but I think down the road, there's definitely some use cases where it could definitely do that.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. Let's see. We've got another one from Heather here. So Heather says, when you're in interview with a hiring manager, do you have any recommendations for questions to ask them at the end of an interview, looking to be part of an effective data team and avoid any toxic work environments? Okay, cool. So kind of two-parter there.
So if I'm interviewing and I want to assess whether the team is toxic or it's an effective team, one of the big questions I always ask, and it's not necessarily at the end, is asking, was this role filled prior? And then trying to, and that kind of leads down a rabbit hole of understanding, okay, if it was filled, why did the person leave? And you can assess some of it out that way. The other side of it is if I were the manager trying to figure out if the person's a good hire, generally I would, I'd probably approach it more from trying to understand what their values are, why they actually want the job. And if they come across as somebody that's just, looking to get out of a job somewhere else, or they're just looking for a quick pay raise and they're not they're not coming to you for any longevity or anything, like usually that's not a great sign to me. But it all depends on the situation.
Yeah. One thing I always tell people there is like, don't ask anything that you should have found out from like a 15-minute internet search ahead of the interview. That's kind of like the biggest red flag. I had somebody ask me one time, they were like, what product does Vistaprint sell, when I used to work at Vistaprint? And I was like, oh man, it's a bad sign for you, dude. So don't do any of that. Heather, hope that one was helpful. Let's see. So we've got another one here from Catherine. So you talked about stepping away from the skills to look outward from the team. How do you manage your standards and expectations in data analysis when the results are not as high as you would like? I guess maybe, Catherine, I'm not sure, but if you're asking about like, as your own data skills are kind of getting dull, I think let's play it as if that's how the question should be interpreted. But Catherine, feel free to jump into the chat. Yeah, she says yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I think in terms of So I think in terms of the data analysis that isn't as high quality as you would want it to be, it's usually that. So for me, from my standpoint, where that comes from, like where I would get that feedback from, is our stakeholders. I'm not in the position to evaluate the statistical analysis that my biostatisticians put out. Like I don't have that education. I don't have that background. So if the feedback is coming back to me that like it's not strong, there's issues with it, it's a matter of having those conversations with the individual, and talking through that with them and trying to understand where we can improve. And a lot of people think that sounds harsh, but I'd rather have somebody come up to me and be straight with me and tell me like, hey, your communication's terrible. Like you're not doing this right. You're coming across as non-collaborative, rather than, going to like 5 people behind me and, spreading that word and not giving me any feedback so I can improve that. And so I think that's kind of where, for me, that comes in, is you need to be able to give that, critical feedback and be able to have those tough conversations with those that are on your team to let them know how they can improve and how people see them.
Yeah, and that can be super hard, but very, very important to be able to do. So you just you got to get over it. Like, and think of it as like tough love. If you're not willing to do it, they're going to be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then so one more here from Connor that I think is a good one. So Connor has just gotten a role as the sole analytics developer on the team. And basically he's asking, how do you approach formulating the long-term strategies for how your analytics teams operates and makes decisions? So that could be like from thinking about the scope to thinking about who you need on the team, the skill sets. Like, how would you, what advice would you give to Connor, who's kind of the first person in this role?
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I would give you is it's going to evolve. So where you're at right now, I mean, and that's easy to see if you're the only person right now, but depending on the size of the organization and what it does, I'll use the example of a startup. So if you're in a small startup, you have a very flat organization. You don't really need a whole lot of people on the data team at that point, especially if they're not a data heavy, like a data centric startup. But if, say, over the years it grows into this behemoth, and now you're looking at maybe not behemoth, maybe you're looking at a growth of 3,000 people, your data team can't function as it probably won't be able to function very well as just a centralized team, of like a small centralized team. And so I think when you think in terms of the long term structure of your data team, one, you need to accept that it will evolve, and two, I would go look at the different structures that are out there. And there's a couple books that, there's a lot of books that discuss how you can do that. There's also probably a lot of blogs that discuss it too. And there's different models, but that centralized data model doesn't do very well in a matrixed organization, like a highly matrixed organization. I think the center of excellence model or the best home model are good ones, and you can just Google those and you'll probably get some good hits there. But it's all about figuring out how close your analysts, how close the analytical professionals should be to the business users, and what business users you should be closest to, and how to structure that. And so I think in terms of the structure, you think that way. I would also encourage you to write down right now, as you are the only analytics person, to start writing down your standard operating procedures and get a manual together. So as you grow, people that come in can look at that manual, but make it a breathing manual, make it a living manual, so that you can easily adjust that and change it as things change. Because it's only going to help you as you take on team members, and it's only going to help the team later on to more easily, build out those standard operating procedures.
Yeah, that's awesome. Connor, I've been the first analyst a couple of times, and the only other thing I would add is like try to talk to as many of the business people as much as you can about like what are you trying to do that is hard right now, and then figure out where can your data skills go in and help them solve those problems. Like the more of those conversations you can have, the better, especially early on. Hope you have fun with the role. It's that's like a wild west place to be, and they've been my favorite roles. So I hope you do have a lot of fun there. Awesome. Well, I think that gets us through all the Q&A we have here. Awesome. Joe, you were fantastic. Everybody in the audience, thank you guys for showing up. Please give Joe some love here, and check him out on LinkedIn. And just look for more from Joe, from Mavens of Data, and keep showing up to these. We really appreciate it. And most of all, thank you so much, Joe. Tons of good information here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. Thanks for getting on, everybody.